This conference is now being recorded.
Welcome to the New York State Association of School Business Officials webinar. Today's program is Go, Supervision and Completion of the Project. Your host for today is Donna Clement, Director of Professional Development with New York State ASBO. Operator assistance is available at any time during this conference by pressing £0. A question and answer session will follow the presentation. You may send chat questions during the presentation using the chat window indicated by a speech bubble icon located to the right of the presentation. Please address chat questions to the Q&A group using the drop-down list located at the bottom of that chat window. Without further ado, I will now turn the call over to our host, Donna. Please begin.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome everyone to today's third in the series for our Capital Projects online course. And we're pleased to have our presenters, Paul Adamo and Nicholas Amoroso. And we also have the Dean for Facilities Management, and Barbara Salato is on the line as well. So we welcome all of you. Those who are taking the course, know that February 28 is the deadline for the activities that you're asked to complete. And if you do need a few more days, since that is a weekend, just let me know and we'll be able to provide those to you. And ask your questions. That's the whole purpose of these webinars, and we're very pleased to have our school construction consultants with us today. And Paul and Nick, it's all yours.
Hello, good afternoon. I'd like to thank ASBO for having us as your presenters today. We're very excited about being involved with this program. As I said, as Donna said, my name is Paul Adamo. I'm a Vice President at School Construction Consultants. We have offices in Hauppauge, New York, and in White Plains, New York. And SEC, School Construction Consultant, has been in business for the past 16 years. I've been with them 12 years, and as the name states, we specialize in construction of schools and other public works projects. Brief background for myself. I have an engineering degree. I've done general construction in New York City at Columbia University and high-end residential work in New York City. And for the past 12 years, I've been specializing in K through 12 construction projects in New York State, and now we just started in Connecticut, all the way from Southampton, Long Island to Carmel, New York. Nick is going to just give you a quick background on the company, on the size of our company, and then we'll get into the presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Nick Amoroso. Like Paul has said, I started School Construction Consultants back in 1994. We are a 30-person firm right now. We're working, like Paul said, throughout the tri-state area, and we appreciate everybody's time for being here this afternoon. I think we're going to head right into our PowerPoint presentation.
Right, that's correct. First thing I like to say is I'm an advocate for a construction manager, obviously, for what we do. I think that no project is too small to get a construction manager involved. Schools can get into trouble with contractors because they don't know how to handle them or know what they're looking at. So, but for this educational purposes, we're going to talk about construction bonds, like sizable projects. You know, not your $20,000 paving job in your parking lot. It's a job that takes time to plan, and that's what we'll talk about today: construction bonds. So the first thing is my first topic. There's a list. My first slide. There's a list of topics we'll be covering, and the first one is: should I use a professional project management team or a construction manager? And then that old term that used to be used was clerk of the works. I think I'm going to jump ahead to the topic, the slide about. So is it prudent to use a construction manager? And then I have some pros and cons. Well, the pros, first of all, is that you get professionals that deal with educational municipal projects, supervising the work for you. And they can supervise the project from the design stage, assisting your architect, to the bidding stage, to the actual construction phase, and then the closeout phase. All the people that work for me have construction experience, and some are registered architects that work for me. So you're getting another layer of professionalism in the field watching your projects. Another pro is for a construction manager is that the fee, our fee, is typically aidable by New York State to the full level of your construction aid. So it's a good deal. If you use it, you still get money back from the state. A CM, a construction manager, the right CM, will always be looking out for the school's best interest in regards to the project timeline and the budget. We at SEC, we consider it our money, and we protect the school's money as the project goes along. So the only con I could actually think of not having a construction manager is that the layout of the money, the fee that it costs a construction manager. But I think it's worth it tenfold. We could on one change order we can negotiate it to a reasonable or the actual level it should be to save you money as well as the cost of the project. Do you want to? Okay. So I'm going to jump to. You had Marty Geiger talk about a bond, and we're going to jump ahead to, let's say the bond passes. What happens first? The first thing that happens is I hope that a preliminary scope of work was developed. That's why you knew how much money to go and borrow, how much money the bond was for. So the next step after that would to start holding design meetings with the architect and the staff, finalizing the plans or developing the plans that will eventually go up to the state for approval. What a construction manager does during these design meetings is he documents the procedures. If we're meeting with science chair people or sports AD directors and we're designing locker rooms or science labs or art rooms, we meet with these people with the architect. We find out what they want in those rooms or in those facilities, and we document it. So when a year later, when we actually go to bid on this work, everybody knows that this is what we planned, and there's documentation through the design process, through the drawing process, and then through the submittal process with the state. Another thing is to keep everybody on track. A construction manager tries to keep everybody focused on what the bond was, and that's what our goal is to get that bond brought in, that construction bond brought in under budget and complete. I have a term there on the slide, avoid scope creep or you will be over budget. It seems like once we get more people involved, once the board has established the scope and then we start bringing in teachers and principals and ADs, they always want a little more. They want a bigger room. They want more science equipment. They want a turf field instead of a natural field. So we have to maintain those budgets. So the construction manager will always remind you of what your budget is and how to maintain that budget.
Once a bond resolution is adopted, as everybody knows, you can't go outside that scope of work for any amount of work. You can't spend $1 more than the bond was appropriated for. We all know that. But as far as the scope of work also, as designed and as developed in the original bond resolution, is what actually has to be constructed. So as Paul was saying, as the program develops and as different people get involved in the program, sometimes it does tend to creep beyond the original intention of what the bond referendum was. That's why it's important for us at that stage of the game to start taking accurate meeting minutes to decide, how the bond and the direction of the bond is going to proceed. And the meeting minutes will document and provide a history of all the conversations that took place during the design process, and will allow everybody to remember 8 months from now, 2 years from now, as the project goes into construction, what was discussed. And we maintain accurate meeting minutes and documentation to support what those conversations were during those design meetings. Equally important to maintaining meeting minutes, like Paul has said, was we have to maintain that the bond stays within the original budget. And how do we do that? As the program becomes developed and the architect starts to design the project, we continually do construction cost updates, and we'll do estimating, budgeting to decipher what the exact dollar amount is that is anticipated on being spent. we have, throughout the years, been very, very, very close with all the budgets that we prepare. And there are many times when the project does tend to grow a little bit, where we've identified where the program has grown, and we add alternates onto the drawings so that if indeed it does come within the budget, you have the opportunity to award different alternates for certain things that you may wish to do in the future. And like Paul said before, we protect your dollars. That's what a good construction management firm will do for you, to protect your dollars as if they were our own, and to be very cognizant of the fact that every dollar that's spent has to be approved by the board, by the superintendent, whoever is the contact person that we need to go to. We don't spend the money on your behalf at any point during the entire process. And that includes going, when it goes into construction for change orders and things like that.
That we'll talk about.
Yep.
Okay. So once we have these design meetings, we also should establish a timeline. And this gets a little sticky because we have to hold everybody to their task, and that's the architect as well, who doesn't work for us, works for the school district. So we get an idea from the architect on how long it will take to develop these plans, and we should try to make him stick to that to get his submittal to the state on time. We usually, at the beginning of the project, we could find out, at the beginning of the bond, we find out what is the lead time for the SED review time. We call up to upstate, or we check on their website, and we find out it's a 16-week turnaround time for drawings. So we put that into the timeline as well. It could be 12 weeks now, or whatever it is, but we need to hit a start date for construction date. It's usually right after the end of school in June 28th. We want to start construction, so we need to start backing out the bidding time, the award time, the bidding time, the SED approval time, and then the drawing time. So we need to actually push the architect a little bit to get the drawings up to the state and have everybody stick to their timeline. And the only people we cannot push is SED review times, the approval times. And then we will have a construction schedule as well, which I'll go and talk to about.
Just one quick note on the SED approval process. I'm sure everybody knows, and if you don't, that the drawings cannot go out to bid until SED has actually issued or at least committed to a building permit for the project. So many, many years ago, when I first started back about 25 years ago, you were able to actually bid the projects before SED gave you their approval. That's no longer the case, and it hasn't been the case for at least the last 10 years or so. So that whole process, like Paul said, has to be done sequentially before you can bid and before the construction process starts. You going to talk a little bit about construction now, Paul, or you want to change?
I'm going to jump to the third slide. I don't know actually what number it is. Communication slide, it's up on the screen now. We like to think of ourselves keeping everybody talking. Sometimes, months will go by, the drawings are just being developed by the architect, or they're just sitting up at the state waiting for review, and nobody else is doing anything. And I think that there's always should be the communication. There should be monthly meetings before the construction starts. We should give updates and say, we could check the website for SED and tell the board, yes, they're reviewing your drawings now. Or we could check with the architect, when are you making your submittal? Your timeline, your time is up. Let's get the drawings up to the state. So we like to be at the center and push everybody in the right direction. There's key times when to bid, and we have to make those times. There's key times to when to start a project, depending on weather. So we always like to keep everybody on track and push everybody in the right direction. And sometimes we annoy the architect and pushing them in the right direction. But that is our job. We work for the school district. We talked a little bit. Nick mentioned a little bit about estimates, and while the design drawings are being developed, we ask the architect to get us a set of drawings when he's half done when he feels he's half done. We call it the 50% set, and he has to print me up a whole set of blueprints of drawings and specs. Even though he's not done, and I would just want to check to see if if what is in the bond is in those drawings. If we say we're building or renovating 7 science rooms, I want to make sure that he has 7 science rooms, and if it says 7 science rooms and it says 2 art rooms, we have to check that he's on the right track. We compare it to the bond referendum, and then we start doing square foot estimates to make sure that we're in the ballpark. We've done so much schoolwork that my company keeps a database of bids we've opened in the past 5 years or more, and we check what 7 science rooms will cost, or what 2 art rooms will cost, or what does a turf field cost. So we check that as he's going, so not to get any surprises later on, so we don't run into any problems. Then once again, as we're getting closer, and this is usually when he's ready to go up to SED, we'll have a 90% set or an 85 to 90% set, and that gets sent up to the state, and they start their review. That's when we break down the whole set of drawings, and we actually do a full-blown nuts and bolts estimate to try to get as close as possible. You always can get a surprise from SED. SED can say, well, you're doing all this work, but you're not handicap accessible on your 3rd floor, and you need an elevator, or you need a handicap bathroom. So those are the surprises you can't anticipate. But the drawings that we send up, we can do a full-blown estimate on and make sure that we're within our budget, our bond budget. If the state does have a comment like that, elevator or handicap bathrooms, it's up to the board if they're going to abide by the SED comments or postpone it or ask for an extension. But it should be something you consider if you're not handicap accessible and you're doing other work. That's another whole topic.
When the drawings are at that 90% phase, the architect is very close to submitting it up to SED if he hasn't done so already. At that point, we also look for constructability issues. As everybody knows, in New York State, or at least in most of New York State, except for the 5 boroughs, WIC's law governs the way the contracts are let out, which means it has to be broken down into general construction, electrical, plumbing, and mechanical at very minimal, those 4 trades, as separate prime contracts. So we'll do a constructability review of the drawings to make sure that every trade is coordinated, at least to the best of our ability, that we can tell that everything is coordinated so that there aren't new light fixtures going where ductwork is going, where electrical conduit is being run. So we look for those things at that point of the job as well, before it goes onto the street, so that we could find out, or before it goes out to bid, I should say, so we could find out as many of the conflicts and try to reduce the amount of change orders, a word that's yet to come, a phrase that's yet to come, but we try to minimize that before it even goes out to bid. And a lot of times when the drawings go out to bid and the contractors are picking up, they have many, many questions. The architect will issue addendums, whether it's 1, 2, 3, different addendums before the actual bid opening date. And we'll do a much stricter plan review at that time to look for those types of things, like I said, constructability, coordination issues, and we'll try to get as much covered in an addendum which changes the actual drawing, legally changes the actual drawings or specifications before the bid opening, so that, again, that whole change order process is hopefully minimalized. It's never going to go away, but at least it'll be minimalized. And I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but...
No, that's good. That's our next slide is actually the bidding and WIC's law slide. There's always strategies on when to bid and how long to bid and alternates to include in the job. The main reason you have alternates is just to make sure that you maintain your budget. If there's something that was added during the design meetings, even the size of the building that you're building, or let's renovate one more science room. We're not sure if we have the money, but let's include that one more science room renovation as an alternate. And then if we're coming under budget and that's a separate price, we go to the board. The board says, yes, we're comfortable. The CM recommends you have the money to do this alternate work. That's the time to do it, not as a change order. The state frowns upon change orders over $20,000 and stuff that was an increase in scope. So to include it as an alternate is the right way to do it, because it's a bid item. The contractor knows he still has to give you a good price on that to get the job. If you give it to him as a change order later, he's holding the cards and he'll try to make more on that item. So when to bid is always a good question. It's usually when you get approval from the state is when you want to bid, but you like to have you like to have time. If you know that we need to build a classroom or build an extension, you don't want to start that extension right outside the windows during finals week in June. So you really want to break ground and do the heavy work in the summer. So you need to back out from the end of school when to bid. Right now I'm in a couple of school districts, and we're bidding now for the summer work. We're not starting this work till June 28th, but we're bidding it now in February. We're getting very good prices, and we're getting lots of competition on contractors are hungry out there. So now is a perfect time to bid. How long to bid actually depends on how big the contract is. If it's a simple $100,000 paving job, you could bid it for a week and a half or 10 days. But if it's a complex building, if you're building extensions or a 30,000 square foot extension, you need to put it on the street out to bid for 4 to 5 or 6 weeks. It all depends. The architect and the CM should get together and see where it fits into your timeline. But when you get squeezed, if you get the state approval back, or if there was a lot of questions from state ed, sometimes you get squeezed and you have to cut your bid time down. I've seen good things happen with cutting the bid time down. I've seen bad things happen. The problem is when you bid late in the day, and then you get a contractor who you check out and he doesn't have the best qualifications for that job, you don't have time to rebid. So it's always better to bid early and even with time to rebid if you had to. If you know you need to start July 1 on a project, now February, March is the time to bid. In case you're over budget, you could rebid. In case you get contractors that are not qualified, and the cleanest way is to rebid and to have hearings. I always like to bid as early as you possibly can. You have anything to add to that?
Well, no. The bidding, I mean, what I've found out over the years is no matter how much time you give a contractor to bid a job, they wind up doing it the night before the bid opening anyway. So they tend to want more and more time, but yet, like I said, they do it within a matter of a few days. We're going to continue on this, though. Can I continue with Wick's Law?
Sure.
I know we talked briefly about Wick's Law before and how we break it up, or how the state requires us to break it up into 4 prime contracts, and you see the 4 on the screen: GC, electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. There are firms out there that think it makes sense to break it up into more than 4 prime contracts. Sometimes as many as 30, 40 different contracts, where you have one person doing sheetrock work, and another person doing taping and spackling, and then a third doing painting. And our experience throughout the years has led us to believe that that's absolutely not the right way to do it, because all that does is create an opportunity for more people to blame the other and say, hey, listen, the paint doesn't look as good as it should because the taper didn't do the right job, and then he'll say the sheetrocker didn't do the right job. And I'm using a very simple example, but that kind of stuff happens all day long on every project that we're on, even if it's only the 4 contractors pointing fingers at each other. I just got back from a job meeting about a half hour ago, and it was some pretty heated dialogue that took place between the GC and the mechanical contractor because he wasn't ready. The GC is ready for him, and he's holding the other guy up. So imagine if you escalate that exponentially into 20, 30, 40 different contracts. We're okay with it. We'll coordinate it, but on our experience just tells us that it's just not the right thing to do. It's just, we have the ability to do it, but it's just not the right thing to do. There's so much finger pointing, and 25 contractors have 25 different lawyers, and unfortunately sometimes that leads to not a smooth process, and that's the last thing you need. When time is always of the essence for your projects, it doesn't matter what we're doing, whether it's a boiler replacement or, like Paul said, some of the bigger additions. Time is always of the essence. And how to streamline that process would be to streamline the number of contractors working so that there's less opportunity for it to go.
On any in any single trade project, we've done millions of square feet of roofing work. A lot of times you could just bid that separately. You could bid a roofing project separately, not through a GC, and still do well on a project like that. Or a site work contract. You could hire directly a site work contractor who can do the paving, the concrete work, and put that all together for you. Yeah. So the last item on this slide is alternates, and I put adds flexibility, and I just want to say that it just adds flexibility that you could increase your scope if you have the money and you have alternates built in. It prevents you from being over budget and getting more bang for your buck when you do bid something. It also helps you not choose the right contractor, but it also there's contractors that will bid alternates differently, and you can get a good price on alternates. I do have a question that's from a few minutes ago, and I'm going to answer it right now. The question is, most districts pay their FCM directly, or is it paid through the engineering firm? And we are typically, or actually 99% of the time, we are paid directly by the school district. It adds, we work for the school district. We work for the Board of Education of that school district. I don't think it's a good idea for us to work for the architect. It's another layer of protection that the district has. Another professional, not, we're all on the same team, but we all have jobs to do, and the CM can make sure that everybody does their job, and then we work for the district and make sure that we do our job. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Our contract is always through the
Right.
district. And like Paul said, our only interest is to protect your best interest.
Correct. The next slide is about cash flow. Typically on smaller projects, cash flow is not necessary. Usually the money is encumbered in somebody's budget, or it's a small bond. They'll do one borrowing, one ban or bond, and they'll have the money. On larger projects, $10, $20 million jobs, we, at the very beginning of the project, probably when we know the drawings are done, the final drawings are done, and we have an idea of when the job's going to start, we prepare a cash flow for the business official, and it's not something you just, the 20 months, divide the 20 million by 20 months, you need $1 million a month. You could do it that way, but you could get into trouble doing it that way. If you're doing a large building or a large addition, there's a lot of money up front that is needed. There's a lot of money in the beginning of a building, in the concrete, in the excavating, and the concrete and the steel, and the masonry that is done in the first 2 or 3 months of a project, where you're going to need a lot of money up front. But then things slow down as the finishes come in, as the ceilings, the flooring, and the painting. That's cheaper work. So that's why you need a construction manager to take the contracts, all the contracts that were awarded, break them out in the schedule to see when they will be billing for that work, to make sure that you have the money to pay the contractors. Typically in an AIA document, once the architect signs off on a requisition, the school district has 45 days to pay, or sometimes it's 30 days to pay. So we want to make sure you have that money available. That's why we give you this cash flow before the work even starts, so you know that when you need to do your borrowings or your bans and contact the firms that you need to contact to have the money on hand.
Yeah, we had one situation where, I guess it was about a year ago, when the market and the borrowing was real difficult to get. Everybody knows how the economy panned out, and it's still not in great shape. But about a year ago, we had a school district that did not do the borrowing, was having a hard time getting the money, and almost bankrupted a contractor because he had so much. The whole project was done before he even got paid a dime, and he had laid out so much money that it was real difficult for the guy to stay in business. And until things cleared up and they finally were able to pay him, he was really upset. He was threatening with lawyers. I mean, it was a situation that we had to keep at bay until the money literally started flowing. So it happens.
I know on the screen you might not be able to read the cash flow, so I believe the ASBO website has the cash flow in a PDF form. I changed the names on this district just because it's an ongoing project. It's a $20 million, or about $21 million bond. Lots and lots of projects, from a turf field to boilers to site work. And it was I simplified it even a little bit more. You need to just you don't need to break it down into the dollars and into the dollars. You break it down into tens of thousands of dollars. Well, that's how I do it. And I take each project. I know when the project is going to be taking place. Like, let's say a boiler at Owens Elementary boiler. It's midway down the page. I know what that boiler is going to cost. I know in the beginning he's going to submit for bonds and insurance. He's going to order the material. But the first month I don't need a lot of money for that project. But towards the second and third month of that project, when the boiler is on site, he has all his manpower, his steam fitters are on the job welding. He's going to build up labor costs and be billing for his labor and the material boilers. So that's why it goes up at September and October. The same thing is, let's go to the top one, the turf field. High school, it says high school turf and track field. In the beginning, it's some excavating, it's ordering the materials, but then all of a sudden you have a couple big payments to make to this contractor, $500,000 at a pop, because the track got paved, the drainage was installed, and the turf showed up on the site. So it's something that typically, a business official probably wouldn't be able to do this without the help of an architect or a CM, and not knowing how a job is being built and how and where the expensive items are. The cash flow is very important. If you have a CM, we do it automatically. You make your CM do it. It can help you in the long run, so you don't have the problem that this other district had about not having the money to pay. I didn't break it down into bands and bonds. It's more of a bonding question. If there's any questions at the end on how I do a cash flow, you're more than welcome to ask me. Any questions at any time, you could just type in. The next example, I have a change order log, and typically we put in contracts now, and we have what's called allowance money. Right in the bid documents, we include, let's say, in this project here, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, it says change order log, and then under that it says allowance. Allowance is money we include in there. It's a cash allowance. Sometimes it could be a concrete allowance. It could be steel allowance. But typically, I just like to put a general cash allowance in there that we have in case of a change order. Now, it's not something we go and we say, oh, yeah, we're going to go spend that $20,000. There's usually a district representative, which is usually the business official or the buildings and grounds or a building committee or a board member or the whole board, that before we authorize the spending of this $20,000 allowance, it is gone through several people in the school district for protection. It just also, we've included to prevent slowdowns in the job. If we're in the summer, it's July 5th and a long weekend, and we open up a wall, we demo a wall to install a new handicap toilet. We open up that wall, and there's asbestos there, and we had no provisions for asbestos behind that wall. Then now we have to mobilize an asbestos crew. It could be several $1,000s to stop the work, seal the room, and hire an asbestos crew. So now you have a $4,000 or $5,000 extra, and you have no way of you have to stop the job. Or you make a phone call to the buildings and grounds. He calls the business official. You get whatever the protocol in that district is, and sometimes it's even a phone call to 2 or 3 board members on a conference call that, listen, we found asbestos, we need to take care of it, we have $4,000 in allowance money, it built into the contract, can we use it for this to not stop the job? And it's very prudent to do that because in the summer, when we have 7 weeks to complete the work, any time lost can hurt the end date. So that's why we include allowances in the contracts. They're limited and they're approved by the district. Okay, so this is my change order log starts with that $20,000. It's usually the first $20,000 is the money will come out of the allowance if there are $20,000 in change orders or extras. Anything beyond that absolutely would have to be written up in an AIA change order by the architect and submitted to the board for approval. Typically with allowances, it still goes to the board, but it's not going there immediately to the board. It's followed through with some paperwork. I see Barbara has a
Word follow.
How much is it acceptable for allowances by SED? They are cracking down on that. They have had comments on other jobs. There is no rule of thumb, though. We've been doing 5% or less on jobs if we know the job is $100,000. A $5,000 allowance is not unheard of. But I do not believe there's a rule of thumb right now with SED and what they allow. Maybe in the future they'll add something, but right now some architects have taken them out altogether. Some architects put a lot in. So it's kind of hit or miss, but I always like them because it keeps the job moving. We just need a protocol set up at the beginning of the job with the school district, and that's how we go into it with the board.
Yes, and the allowance, the whole discussion about allowances versus change orders, should we include allowances in, or should we just not include allowances and write change orders for everything that comes up, really depends upon the district. And like Paul said, the protocol to approving extras that do come up on a job, in order to facilitate and to expedite the process, the allowance is used quite often, so that not that we're trying to circumvent the process or avoid, like I say, going to the board with any of this. It's just a way of expediting the process when you have such a strict or stringent timeline over a period. Usually, most of the work gets done between the end of June and the beginning of September in school districts. Because that timeline is so tight and there's so much work that gets done during that period of time, the allowance just gives us a way to expedite the process, not to circumvent the process. That's real important to know, because we do not spend that allowance money without approval from the top official in the school district, the Board of Education, the Director of Facilities. We do not authorize approval of allowance expenditures or of change order expenditures. So it's just a way of expediting the process, not circumventing it. That's very important.
I'm working in one school district right now where we had no allowance money, and every time there was a change order that was submitted, they wanted to know where it fell, why did we have that change order. And I'm going to go through this 3 types of change orders. One is a field condition, which is an unforeseen condition. Like I said before, we open up a wall to mount a new, to get to some plumbing behind the wall, and there's asbestos there. That is unforeseen. Nobody has x-ray vision. We could have did probes prior to the bid, but that would have been destructive probes. It would have damaged the bathroom, and then would have shut the bathroom sooner if we saw the asbestos. So that is a field condition. It's also on a site work project. You find a buried dry well, or even we've had a job, we found a buried car once in a field. So, these schools have been around for 60, 70 years. It could have been somebody's farmland at one time, and something was buried. So that's a field condition. One is an owner request. The owner says, "Listen, I don't like VCT tile. I want terrazzo finish instead, or terrazzo tile," and that's an owner request. If it's within budget, the board wants it. That's an owner request change order. And the third item is something that's missing from the drawings, either an oversight, an error. Nobody likes to talk about it, but it happens. Something that we just got done paving a parking lot, and then we find out we need to add dry wells. So that could be, well, now you had to reopen that paving. So that's the worst kind of change order. That's one that we try to avoid by doing a good drawing review, and the architect tries to avoid by doing his homework, but sometimes things get missed. So that is the 3 types of change orders, and in this one district, they want to know. I put on the change order log in the comments, field condition, owner request, or error, and very rarely do I put the error, but they do happen.
Yeah, and being independent from the AE firm, the architectural engineering firm, being independent from everybody, contractors, and again, being owners' representatives, we're not afraid to identify how the change order was developed, how it occurred, whether it was a field condition, like Paul said, or whether or not it was something that should have been included on the documents. And then at that point, everybody has to sit around the table and explain to the owner, why, how, and
right.
The architect engineer will have to explain, what happened.
Right. I'm going to add one more thing to that. There's two types of even errors. There's errors that where you already built the parking lot and then you have to go back and dig it up. You've lost value. Now you have to redo it. And some cases where, let's say, we installed 2 new air conditioning units on the roof, but there's no power shown to them on the drawing, so that was an omission, not an error. We just left the electric out. It wasn't shown on the plans. We rushed it up to the state, or we rushed it out to bid, and there's no power shown. So that's something you got value for. You have to pay for that electric anyhow, whether you bid it now or you bid it or you get it as a change order. So that's another type.
All right, so that takes care of our first slide today. We have 630 more to go.
No, we're moving now.
We're moving.
Okay. In the documentation that it stated that I should go over the SED regulations 155.5 for school student and school safety. It's the uniform safety standards for school construction and maintenance. It should be included in. It's on the website. You can look it up on SED. It should be in every spec book for every job that you bid. There's some major ones that need to be gone over, and I'll go over those now. When you're building an addition, and this goes to student safety, sometimes that addition is going right at the end of the existing building, and you have to block an egress or block an exit. So that egress is now changed. You either have to build a tunnel, which I have pictures of later in the slide presentation, or you have to close a classroom off and create a new door. That one's very important because you need to maintain a safe egress for the children out of the building at all times. Even at the beginning, like the beginning of the school year in September, if I've been working all summer building additions but they're not ready yet, the first day of school, that first week of school, I meet with the principal and I need to have a fire drill showing those students their new exiting out of the building. And that's very important. In a fire, people panic, or if there's enough smoke alarm or fire alarm. We need to maintain and let the children know where to go out of the building. And there's been 2 fires recently on Long Island, both after school, but it does happen, and we need to make sure that nobody gets hurt. There was nobody hurt in either fire on Long Island.
Yes, we are very diligent in making sure that the contractors are working in a safe manner. Obviously, we're working in occupied schools, and there's nothing more important to us than the safety of those children that are in that building and the staff that's in the building as well. These rescue rules and regs were established to do exactly that, to protect the building's occupants and the safety of the children. Years and years ago, when I first started, there were no rescue rules and regulations, and if they were minimal, and nobody knew what they were. And contractors were doing things in buildings that they should not have been doing, and actually established the company in 1994 for this exact reason, to make sure that these kids were protected from outsiders, contractors. Not that all contractors are bad people or anything like that. They work to make money. And unfortunately, sometimes they don't think about the building's occupants and the children and the safety of the children. We've had to stop them from doing very, very silly things sometimes on construction sites that you would just shake your head at and say, doesn't this person have any common sense whatsoever? And we were very glad when these rules and regs came into effect, because now we had a document we could point to. We had verbiage that we could include in the bid specifications and onto the drawing that we can point to now, and the contractors can't give you a hard time. I'm going to give you one real quick example. Everybody used to use that orange snow fencing for protection of a job site. Back in the 80s, the 70s, 80s, that's all they used. And it used to, when the contractor left, 15 minutes later, that orange fence was down, and kids were riding bicycles through excavated sites, and their rebar sticking up everywhere, and it's just not a safe environment for anybody to be in. Right now, the contractor has to use 6-foot chain link fence around the entire perimeter of the construction. They're obligated to separate construction from the students and the staff of the building at all times, and they can never cross paths. So these rules and regulations were put in place for a very good reason, and we're very glad that they were, and we're certainly diligent about enforcing them.
Right. One of the other rescue regs, not the construction and maintenance one, but the district should have a health and safety committee. I've been to health and safety meetings. It's good when you're starting a construction project. You don't need to drag the CM there for every health and safety meeting, but it's good to get him in the beginning to show his face, let people know who he is, talk about the egress paths, talk about how the fire alarm will always be maintained, talk about construction barriers, noise, anticipated noise that you'll hear during the day, and it won't exceed the 60 decibels that state ed forbids. The dust control, what measures that we're taking, and it's also an avenue to, if you do have complaints, the Health and Safety Committee is going to get complaints about construction, that you go directly, the CM can help you. It's their job to rectify those problems, to prevent dust from blowing in an elementary school window, to prevent the diesel fumes getting sucked in an intake into a cafeteria fan. So the CM, you should use them. You should use them for those reasons. Get them to your health and safety meetings. If you don't have them, we'll just get them to meet people on the committee, just for a few minutes, so they know and what he can do, and he knows what you're complaining about.
Yeah, if you could go to the next slide, I want to take the safety discussion to the next level. If you look at the next slide, it talks about student staff safety being the #1 priority. There's absolutely nothing more important on a construction project than the safety of the kids and the staff. I always say the kids first, because the staff, children just don't know any better. They're naturally curious, and they want to be looking out the window where we might be doing some work, or they want to look through a fence. And it's absolutely our #1 priority, and it should be on everybody's #1 priority list. And the second bullet point talks about the contractor's safety and maintaining a safe environment for his own people to work in. He's absolutely obligated to do so. We monitor that situation. We make sure that everything is indeed going along in accordance with their safety plans. And the last bullet point about OSHA training required up until recently, I think it was last June or July, they passed a New York State law that OSHA 10-hour OSHA training is required for anybody that walks onto a public works project in excess of $250,000 or more, which is most of the work that everybody's doing these days. If it's in excess of $250,000, every single worker that comes onto that job site has to be trained by OSHA for 10-hour minimum in a 10-hour OSHA course, which is finally something that makes sense, because you'd have guys on job sites that just didn't understand safety and just had no experience, or maybe they were new or whatever it was, or they're not used to working in schools. And at least this gives us a much more level playing ground and a much better quality of contractor that's working now.
Typically, if the CM, the construction manager, if he sees something unsafe, we notify the owner of the company, the foreman on the job, but it's not our job to train these guys on the right way. Sometimes when there is an accident, and hopefully it's not a serious accident, OSHA does show up on the construction site. They hear about the accident through another worker or through a union report, and OSHA will show up. They can give out violations and fines to the contractors, not typically going to the district, but it is something they can come to the school district site. They can write the contractors up for violations. So it's just something else to think about. Okay. Yes, we do have a question. Barbara, who is responsible for checking that the contract has the appropriate? Well, we actually take on that responsibility in a roundabout way. We ask for the OSHA 10 cards with the payroll reports, and we collect them from the contractor, and then we turn over the copies with the first or second, whatever requisition it is, we turn it over to the district. So if we have 6 guys in the payroll reports, we expect to see 6 cards, copies of those cards, behind it. We haven't had a lot of problems. There's no forgery of cards. These guys are actually getting the training. They know they need it to work, and we haven't had a lot of problems about it. We make them submit the OSHA cards with every requisition. If it's the same guy month after month is on the job, that's fine. Then it shouldn't be a problem for them to submit the copy of his card every month. So yes, we're actually doing that. We're taking that responsibility. But it's not, we're just monitoring the situation. We're taking the guy's card, and I think I don't know when they expire, if they're every 5 years or not, but we'll check. The next slide.
I'm going to say it talks a lot, the slide shows a lot about what we've been talking about, obviously, Vermont. Egress, as Paul said, anytime you change the direction of egress for the students, they have to have a fire drill so that they're familiar with the path of egress. The State Education Department requires us to maintain 2 means of egress out of any occupied room. And, there are certain restrictions for smaller rooms, less than 500 square feet, but I like having 2 means of egress out of every room, even if it's 5 square feet. Security on the site and as far as when the contractors leave, our guys are with the contractors while they're working. If they're leaving at 3 o'clock in the morning, we're leaving at 3 o'clock in the morning with them. We did a roof project a number of years ago where the contract actually started at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and finished at 5 o'clock in the morning. And Paul and myself were the ones locking the gates at 5 o'clock in the morning, heading home for an hour's worth of sleep, and then starting our day at 7 a.m. for the next round. So security is very important. Building security, contractors are not allowed to walk through the buildings unless they're escorted. They all have to have ID tags. That's all part of the rescue rules and regs as well. So we take security very seriously. And the learning environment, obviously the children are there to learn, and we're not there to disturb them. So when there are things going on like Regents exams, midterms, 4th grade, 3rd grade testing, whatever it is, we shut the contractors down so that doesn't turn into a contractor yelling at us that he has to remobilize. We anticipate all of that. We like to include that in the bid documents when the testing schedules are, so that the contractors know before they bid there's going to be a week in May or a week in June where they're not going to be able to work at the high school or the middle school or the elementary school because of certain things. So we take that learning environment very seriously. I mean, that goes hand in hand with the safety issue. And we make sure that they do the least amount of disruption possible. There are projects where we have to put $50 million worth of work in place, and there are going to be some inconveniences. But for the most part, those inconveniences have to happen after hours, before the kids come in, on Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, extended school breaks, snow days. We like to get a lot of work done because the contractors show up to work, and the kids aren't in the building. So those are opportunities for us to work, throughout the building. So we know not to disturb the learning environment, and we value that as something that's very sacred for the kids.
The next few slides are just, this wasn't supposed to be a safety presentation, so I'm just going to really just show you what the state requires. We're supposed to have chain link fence. This picture is of a gate, chain link fence. It should actually be locked when there's nobody at the gate. They should go in the gate and lock it up, and then go, open it when they need it, so nobody can wander onto the site.
Just one quick thing, Paul. If you could just go back, you could see behind the gate is a big metal box, and that's actually a rooftop unit that's going to go onto that new addition. You can see the steel being built in the background. All the new equipment for the project has to be delivered and stored behind closed gates as well. There could be nothing that the kids can climb on, play with, get hurt on. Everything has to occur behind a 6-foot fence. We have some pretty nice slides to show, like Paul said.
Right. The site should be clearly marked. It should have danger signs, hard hat signs. Even in this one job, we had our construction trailer, SCC construction trailer behind chain link fence, and we had a gate to get into it. We just want to minimize the contact between the students and the workers. If not minimize, eliminate. You don't want that contact. So we're just going to show you a couple more of these pictures.
Yeah, these two pictures right here, you can see the silt fencing, the black fencing that goes around the perimeter of the site, and that is to obviously for erosion control, so that as we're working and you do get periods of heavy rain, the soil and the silt doesn't wash out and do damage to neighboring properties. The picture on the right shows an egress ramp that we had to build in order to get the students safely over an excavated area, because there were times when we do building additions at the end of the building where if children do have to get out the windows, that they're going to get out into a safe passageway, and we're going to lead them off the site away from the construction without them actually physically crossing the construction.
Once again, this is an egress path and an egress tunnel. We actually built a steel cage or steel tunnel to protect, because we had masonry work above where the egress path would be. And it seems like it was an enormous cost for this, but it was the only way to build this addition and to have children safely leave the building in case there was an emergency. So that tunnel on the left there probably cost $30,000-$40,000. It was 70 feet long and steel. It had lighting in it. I think it had smoke alarms in it as well.
Yes, it has to, yeah.
So it's an enormous cost for nothing because it gets taken down, but it's necessary.
The next photo shows, again, perimeter fencing, perimeter silt fencing for erosion control. Just more examples of what you need to do to keep the site not only clean and safe, but from silt traveling and onto neighboring properties. In this one particular slide on the left, you see the hay bales. That's used quite often because as water flows through, it filtrates out all the silts and sands from leaving the site.
Right. This is actually becoming a new item. There's a new regulation. It's called Stormwater Protection. So it's called SWIP, Stormwater Protection Act. And any kind of site work over an acre, you need to have a SWIPS consultant, which is something new that's come about in I think it's Suffolk County. It's New York State. So that's something you should check with your consultants about on should a SWIPS plan be in place. This is also temporary doors and dust control, so I'm just going to briefly just show those. And just go back over some things that we covered pre-construction. I'm going to get to construction now. This is a timeline. This is a project that's completed already. That's why I'm using their timeline. There was multiple packages that we did. We did 9 bid packages over 2 years. We submitted it in phases to SED. We had to maintain, and in a case like this, you have to maintain budgets, on each phase, so not to short the people at the end of the project. So it was complicated in bidding strategies and opening bids and having money for the remainder projects and keeping a tight rein on everything. I typically I give board presentations and I keep generic timelines. I don't show them when the painting and when the sheetrock's going up, but I tell them the duration of the construction, the duration of the bidding process, and the duration of the punch list, and when we should be closed out. Okay, the construction phase, and this is basically what we do after all the bidding and everything is done. We provide on-site supervision. The state does not require on-site supervision. I just think it's something that most districts or any district should consider on any project of any size. To have so many things can go wrong, or not wrong, but incorrectly if it's not supervised. We provide that on-site supervision. We keep records. When something does go wrong, we have photographic records of the job. We have job meeting. We have meeting minutes. If a contractor is not performing, we can go to our daily reports and tell you how many men he had on what day and how long they were there. So if he's not doing his job and you try to get him to work, you have a record. You have another set of eyes keeping records of the whole project. The closeouts. Closeouts at the end of the job, you want your warranties, you want your health department permits, your as-built, and you want your punch list completed, and you want all the paperwork in a nice package, so then you could file for your state aid, send your cost report to the state, and get your money back from the state. Usually, it's a procedure. It always takes a while. It seems like when contractors get 90% of their money, things slow down. 95% of the money, they're never really worried about that 5%. So it seems like we have to stay on the job until we're pushing them till the final payment is made.
One of the things that are bulleted here is as-built drawings, warranties, permits. As-built drawings are drawings that the contractors prepare to reflect what they've actually constructed. There are times when you're in the field that things change. Piping runs that was supposed to go down the corridor on the left side couldn't go on the left side because there's duct work in the way, so we had to put it on the right side. Or we had to bend it around this corner to avoid hitting anything, a sprinkler head or anything like that. So an as-built drawing will reflect what the actual conditions are that were built and how it differs from the original architectural drawings. So that's what an as-built is. It's good to have that because once ceilings go back up, you want to know where to find your mechanical equipment, your plumbing lines, your valves, and things like that. So an as-built drawing will facilitate for you that in the future. You'll have a record of where everything is.
Okay.
The punch list, like Paul said, difficult process, the punch list, because sometimes the list actually grows. We'll write a punch list with the architect. Sometimes it could be 1 page. Sometimes it could be 20 pages worth of things, depending on how big the project is. The more people, the more time that the contractor delays in getting that punch list done, sometimes that punch list just continues to grow. And until he's 100% complete with that punch list, he does not get 100% of his money. So we hold that in abeyance until the punch list work is 100% complete. The owner is 100% satisfied. Everything is working 100% the way it was designed to. The architect has signed off. The health department signed off. We have signed off. And then the contractor is allowed to submit for final payment. And then, like Paul said, with all the cost reports that are required by SED for you to get your aid, building aid, our spreadsheets typically have the SED numbers built into the financial report to help you with that process of getting everything sequentially up to the state so that you can get your aid as quickly as possible.
We typically, there's also always 5% retainage in municipal works project. We don't, our policy, SEC's policy is we don't like releasing that retainage or even partially releasing that retainage unless he's done. The retainage is an incentive to get him going. I always get the request from contractors, well, you're holding $100,000 of my money in retainage. I only have $5,000 worth of punches. You know what? Get the $5,000 worth of punches done, and then we'll release your retainage. Because it seems like if I start to release it in pieces, you forget where our job site is, and it never gets done, or it goes on for another year. So that's it. That's 5% retainage. I don't recommend releasing it unless it's some kind of owner delay, or that something that we're waiting for something to happen before, so he can finish. If he's being held up, is one thing. But if it's just him and he can't finish his punch list, that's his problem. I would hold his retainage until he's complete. One other thing that I didn't list here, but it's very important, release of liens. You want to make sure that, and even partial release of liens, you need to make sure that your contractor is paying his subcontractors as the job is progressing. Because now, with every requisition now that I collect, or almost everyone, is we get partial release of liens. We want to know he's paying his subs so we don't have liens on the job, and we have lawsuits from subcontractors or suppliers that come after the school district. I was on a job, I'm not going to mention the district, where a roofing contractor was not paying his carter, the guy removing the debris from the site. And it was a multi-million-dollar job at 4 buildings, and the contractor was not paying his bills. This local carter came to the school district and says, I want my money. He says, no, you have to get your money from the prime contractor. So he took that personally and actually brought garbage back to the site, and he brought dumpsters back to the site filled with garbage, smelly garbage as well. So it's something that we avoid now by making sure he's paid as you go along. All the subs, whether it's roofing suppliers, whether it's carters, garbage carters, or the guy who delivers the sheetrock, we ask for these release of liens during the project so we don't get stuck with something like this.
Yeah, as important as the lien releases are, it's also important not to be overpaid, to overpay a contractor. As they submit their payment requests, we check the lien releases, we make sure that the subcontractors are being paid, and we make sure that the percentages that they're asking for to be paid, whether it's a progress payment or a final payment, we make sure that the percentages are accurate, are complete, so that he does not wind up ahead of the game. That's the worst place for us as a firm, for you as an owner to be in, is to allow the contractor to get ahead of you financially. Because like Paul said, it's so hard to get these guys back, even when they get into that punch list stage, and you think they're winding down the project, and then they just disappear and they go make their money on other projects. And unless you hold enough money back, or unless you're far enough ahead of them, it's a very difficult process.
I'm seeing a question about, does the school district need to keep the lien releases in their permanent records? I would say as long as you're required to keep the requisitions, those are the bills or the invoice or the requisitions from the contractors, the release of liens should be attached to that or in the same package. As long as the law says for you to keep those requisitions, I would keep the release of liens. Otherwise, it's a legal question. I would just check with someone like your school's attorney.
Yeah, I mean, again, experience has believed that the contractor has up until 1 year to make a claim and to compile to file a mechanics lien. And if it's past that 1 year point, then he has no opportunity to do so after that 1 year. Now, when does that 1 year start? When does that 1 year end? Is a little bit of a gray area, but for the most part, it is 1 year's time that they have to file a lien. Now, contractors or subcontractors will reach out to us as construction managers on many occasions to let us know they're not being paid. And they'll say, I don't want to file a lien out of respect for you or out of respect for the district or the whatever. And we tell them it's not a reflection on us. It's just really the only vehicle that they have to protect themselves from getting literally shafted out of the money from a general contractor or mechanical contractor. It doesn't matter. So the lien, even if it does come in, don't take it personally. It's just the way of a contractor protecting his or her own financial interest. Right. And we could ask the GC or the prime contractor to bond the lien, and that will give you an insurance policy, basically, that the contractor will pay off that lien before before closeout of the project. So
I didn't add this at all, but I talked about record keeping, that once the project's going, hopefully it's all going well, that the FCM keeps records on amount of men and schedule updates, meeting minutes. But sometimes a contractor doesn't do what they're told or doesn't do what's in their contract, is not keeping up with the other primes, delaying the other primes from completing their work. And then you could have a real big mess and you could get claims from different people. We've been involved in projects where there were projects with no CMs, and the job was going nowhere. Everybody was pointing fingers. We got called in by an attorney we know, and we step in and try to pull everybody back together. When you call a bonding company, the first thing they're going to ask you is, well, let me see the documentation. Where did he start slipping? When did he start slipping? Can I see your daily reports? And if you don't have a CM, you can't provide that to a bonding company. So it's another avenue to protect yourself. Sometimes a bonding company will fight you on paying out on a claim because you don't have good records, and the CM can provide you with those good records. They can start the paper trail. If the electrician is supposed to start on next Monday, it doesn't show up for a couple of days. So you send them a little fax on Wednesday, say, well, you were supposed to start on Monday. You're now delaying the job. It doesn't show up for a couple more days. So now you're saying, wow, now I got to be serious. So I check the contract specifications, and it says I send them a 7-day notice or a 3-day notice. This is a legal document. Sometimes I get help from the school's attorney on writing these. things, or at least I review my letter with the school's attorney. You send the 3-day notice demanding you have 3 days to come back to work and to work in a timely fashion with appropriate manpower. If that doesn't, sometimes the contract says to send a 3-day notice and then send the second 3-day notice if he doesn't show up. These are the things you're going to need if you do have a bad contract. If you do wind up with a bad contract, you need those letters, those records, those daily reports to prove to the bonding company that everybody else was doing their job, but your client, your person you're bonding, did not do what they're told. And we've been very successful in providing that documentation to get the bonding companies to step in and take over or perform the work. But dealing with them is very tricky, and good documentation is key. So that's why I wanted to add that if you make sure your CM is documenting everything appropriately, or if you're having a buildings and grounds person keeping records on a smaller job, daily reports, that he needs to maintain good records on the manpower and a sequence of work. So.
One of the most important things is the anticipation of what could go wrong and trying to solve that problem before it does go wrong. Because once the bonding companies get involved, it means something very serious has occurred, whether it's a delay, whether it's a claim, whether the guy walked off the job and just won't come back.
Or out of business.
Oh, yeah, sometimes, contractors go out of business. We had a situation, we were doing a project, and the contractor decided after 25 years in the business, didn't want to be in the business anymore. He was 95% done with his project. He moved to Upper New York and just didn't respond to the owner. And there were issues with some of the mechanical equipment. We were we were getting into the warranty period, and it was very difficult to get the guy to come back to perform any work because he just lost interest in the industry. And we had to meet with the bonding company several times to get the guy to come back to work. And one of the things, everybody thinks when the bonding company gets involved, everything gets great and they take care of everything. 9 times out of 10, my experience has been when the bonding company gets involved, they try to negotiate with the same guy or same group of contractors that created the problems to begin with. So ABC contracting is the problem. The bonding company comes in. They listen to what you have to say. Hopefully you have documentation, like Paul has said, that's all in order to show the history of where the default or the problems occurred. And then the bonding company goes out of the room and tries to negotiate with the same contractor to come back and perform the work. So 9 times out of 10, you get the same guy back. It's very rare that the guy gets thrown off and you wind up with a new company. And it has happened to us a few times, but for the most part, you're working with the same guy that created the problem. So sometimes I wonder if it's even worth the 2% cost added to the construction dollars. But I think that's food for another day. I don't think that's really part of this discussion.
We're ready for questions now. I mean, I'm not seeing any pop up. Is there anything that somebody would like me to go over, go into more detail, any topic?
Well, thank you so much for all of your information. And, yes, if someone has questions, if anyone would like to phone in a question, Michelle, would you please let everyone know how to do that?
Sure, Donna. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask an audio question by telephone, you can press the number 7 followed by the pound key, and that will place you in a queue and you ought to receive. Wait for your name to be announced and be prepared to ask your question. Again, 7 pound to ask an audio question.
Okay, thank you. And while we're waiting for someone, if there are more questions or an audio question, certainly the stories that you're telling provide so much value because there's so many things that can happen, and it's nice to have the experience of all of you.
Could you give us another hour so we could tell some of the stories that we've had over the
How about 16 minutes?
Donna, I would just like to add something that, the decision on whether or not that you hire a construction manager or you go with the clerk of works really is with the board and with administration. I don't want to lead people to think you have to have, even though despite the fact that I do, and I have used construction managers because I do believe that's the right way to go for our district and in our projects. That's something that you do discuss with your board and you do discuss with, the staff at the school. Most of the time, what made my decision to use a construction manager was that the complexity and the amount of money being spent, because when you have a clerk of the works, they can't be everywhere. And when you hire, or you decide to use your buildings and grounds person, same thing. They can't be everywhere, and someone needs to be really there almost all the time. Because we were doing a roof once, and they put the wrong type of roof on. The construction managers catch that right away, and I can't be there doing that, and nor could my buildings and grounds person. I just wanted to give people there are other options, though, and they should discuss that with their board which way to go, because some people may not see the value of a construction manager. You know the value once you've been through a project, but when you're new and you haven't seen how they work, you really need to go over some of these things. One of the things that I think is great about what Paul's presentation is that whatever you decide, this is what you do need to have. And so if you decide to go with the clerk of the works, then you need an accountant who's doing your cash flow for you, because you need to know when the money is ready and available. So this just gives you an idea of these are the types of things that you need to look at when you're making that decision. And when you're interviewing CMs, these are the type of questions that you can ask them. What do they provide? So it gives you a great idea of the complexity, what goes into the completion of any project.
Okay, thank you for that good advice. Now, we do have an audio question.
Yes, we do. Our first question comes from Christopher with Frankfurt Schuyler Central School District.
Okay, Chris, how are you doing? What's your question?
I just had a quick question about certificates of substantial completion, and at what point during the punch list or the closeout it's appropriate to do those?
Okay, substantial completion is a form that's typically filled out by the architect. We have input alongside with him or her. When you have beneficial use of the space and you're using that space for what it was intended or designed for, and you're beneficially occupying it, you built the music room and the kids are in there and they're practicing their instruments, that's beneficial use of that space. Substantial completion occurs at that time. It's not really tied into a punch list, because you could have a project that's substantially complete, have a certificate of substantial completion that was filled out by the architect and sent up to the state, but the punch list could go on literally sometimes for many, many months after that. So the punch list identifies minor things that need to be done. The substantial completion says that you have that use of the space for what it was intended for it to be used for.
Right. You're also certifying, or the architect certifying, that it's safe to occupy.
Yes.
The light systems, the doors are latching,
fire alarm system,
fire alarms up and running. If it called for a PA system, lights, smoke partitions are complete above the ceiling. It's safe to occupy, and he's telling the state we're substantially complete and we're going to occupy the state, and that new space will be added to your CO.
Right, and there's a whole package of information that gets filed with the state in addition to the substantial completion form that allows you to get a certificate of occupancy from the state.
Correct.
And no matter how big or small the project is, that CO is required from the state education department.
Okay, anything else, Chris?
No, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, Michelle Matisse has a question here. She says, my district is at the end of an $18 million project, and we certainly had our share of stories. So we are in the punch list phase now, and that is presenting its own challenges. So Michelle is certainly commiserating with you.
Yeah, no, Michelle, we feel your pain, because it is a difficult process.
Right.
So there are some projects where we get to a point where the contractor just won't finish. I don't know why, but it's so minor.